Hi everyone, welcome to the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. So today we have a special guest with us here, and this podcast, the goal is, like I've just mentioned to our guest today, is to share stories about business leaders in Asia. So we always look up to business leaders in the West. So when you say, business leaders, they'll say either Elon Musk, the Gary V's. So my mission with this podcast is to get stories from people like the guest here today about business leaders in Asia. So today we actually have the Horizon Chaser with us. So he has 18 years of experience as a pilot with Singapore Airlines. So someone who is from my first guest who is from the aviation industry. And he also co-developed a framework called T.H.R.I.V.E, right? A holistic way of building a resilient way of living. And actually we connected on LinkedIn, and also special mention to one of our previous guests, Sharon Tan. So I found Sau-Yong through one of Sharon's posts. So Sau-Yong also has, besides flying, he has a dozen years of experience in developing human-centered skills like leadership. So today our main topic will be leadership, effective communication, teamwork, and resilience. So Sau-Yong, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Bob. And since you mentioned Sharon's name, of course, I'm more than honored to share the same company as her by being on your show. So thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Love having Asian business leaders like yourself. So I always like to start off the podcast with this question. So what is your favorite Kung Fu movie?
Can I say two?
Yes, 2, 3, 5. It's very up to you.
Okay. The first one, I have to say Ip Man, because I learned Wing Chun from two very good mentors of mine, Professor Joel Lee from the National University of Singapore, and also his wife, Pearl Seat. So Ip Man is one of my favorite Kung Fu movies because it eschews the stereotype of a Kung Fu master as someone who is brash, arrogant, cocky, like the Bruce Lee kind of stereotype. And in someone like Ip Man, we see someone who is more humble, more interested in building peace, enhancing harmony, and only resorting to combat as a last resort. And I have to say first that I'm not a good student. It's just something I aspire towards, but Iman is one of my favorite martial arts movies. And my second favorite martial art movie is actually something more recent, and that is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Right? So in Everything Everywhere All at Once, there are many martial arts sequences, and I think they're very well choreographed. Um, and it also shows that the whole Asian representation thing, right? In American society, life of an immigrant, the challenges that they face, and also how Michelle Yeoh's character, you know, even though she's gone through so much adversity, ultimately she discovers herself. And I think that's a very empowering message in this martial arts movie. And what I particularly like about the choreography, the fight scenes in the movie is how the heroes who are fighting also don't fit the, you know, unbeatable, tall, good looking, um, kind of stereotypical heroes that we tend to see on screen. They are more everyday characters. And I think that brings a very grounded element to the martial arts sequences, which I really enjoy.
That is a good choice, right? I love Ip Man. Other guests have said Ip Man, and they are the first one to say Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I have also recently watched. So for the audience who don't know, if you don't know, you're under a shell, but this is the movie who just won Best Picture and Best Actor, Best Actress, and a lot of things at the recent Academy Awards.
That's right.
Yeah, so yeah, it's actually a bit hard to get hold of this movie. You have to find the right streaming service. It's not even in cinemas.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so not even in cinemas, but and you're right, the action sequences are amazing. So even fighting between different multiverses, and I also really like that movie because it is a real movie. It actually is a movie about forgiveness. So about forgiveness,
Yes.
and also not bringing upon the generational strife. So it has the relationship between the heroine and her father and the heroine and her daughter. So it's not bringing that, generational strife to the next generation, which is it's a leadership lesson by itself, a lot of lessons in that movie.
I think key to what you said about forgiveness is also why the portrayal by Ki Hui Kwan, the male protagonist in the movie, right? The other element that comes out very strongly in the message is the message of love. And I think there's this particular scene where it says, in any other lifetime, I would still choose to do laundry and taxes with you, which is such a romantic line, but at the same time, it talks about the beautiful simplicity of love, right? So I think forgiveness and the other side of the coin is love. And those are actually elements that I think maybe are not really talked about that much in leadership, right? So it's something definitely worth exploring in today's conversation, Bob. So thanks for bringing
Yeah,
up,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no.
for
Actually,
bringing
we
up
can
that point.
just jump straight and talk about this anyway, because it is in many ways a great movie. Like, it is very different from a lot of things in the West. You talk about Ki Hui Kwan, so he also won Best Supporting Actor, and
Right.
his character is really an embodiment of selfless love, which you don't
Mm,
see a lot of Western movies. A lot of Western movies are very selfish sort of love. I want, this from this relationship, whatever. It's very selfless love. Like you said, I would do laundry in every single multiverse with you. That is really a lot of selfless love there. And yeah, I would encourage the audience to really check out this movie and not just watch the effects or watch or be intrigued by the multiverse. So you need to follow the theme of the movie, which is love, and also the generational love, the romantic love, and also,
forgiveness.
yeah,
Yeah.
forgiveness, which is a big theme in the movie. And very unlike all the Marvel movies out there or whatever movies, it's just bad guy, good guy. This is not. It is a real story with a lot of lessons, life lessons in there. Okay, so speaking about this, and today I invited Sau-Yong to speak about leadership. So I just want to start from the beginning. All right, so leadership is a word being used. We are on LinkedIn, so leadership. This word is used everywhere, and it's a very common topic and very popular topic. But to you, what is a good leader to you?
What is a good leader? A good leader is first and foremost someone who is self-aware. Yeah, I think it's some either one of the Chinese philosophers. Maybe it might have been Sun Tzu, maybe it might have been Lao Tzu, who said that if you desire victory, the first step is to master yourself. Before you master your enemy, you must first master yourself. So I think that's a very good philosophy to go by. So first, uh, the first characteristic of an ideal leader is someone who understands who he or she is.
Mm,
And if I were to use a recent example, it would be somebody like Jacinda Ardern. And I think this might polarize some people, right? And I'll use her resignation, or how she decided to step down as Prime Minister of New Zealand, right, as a great example of self-awareness, because it is understanding that she has her limits. She had guided the nation through a major crisis, minimal loss of life, and they are also held up as one of the case studies of how trust in government is actually key to the well-being and happiness of a country. This has been actually talked about in the World Happiness Report in the year 2022, right? So trust in government, exemplified by Jacinda Ardern, has actually allowed them to navigate the COVID-19 crisis. So even though she did a good job, and I think many leaders would be tempted to say that I've really done a good job, I should continue doing it, everybody is dependent on me, so I should not stop. And that leads to all sorts of things. First of which is burnout, then you have things like mental and emotional health issues. So it's really kudos to her to recognize that, okay, she has her limits, and also she would also like to give her attention and energy to the things to the other things in life that matter to her, like her relationship with a partner and her daughter and her family. So I think, contrary to what many people are saying, like, oh, the prime minister shouldn't give up. I don't think it's really a matter of giving up, but knowing when to hand over the reins, knowing when your time is up. Because we've heard so many cases of leaders who overstay their welcome.
Yes, I smiled
And
just now because when you said that, I'm from Malaysia, so I'm like,
oh,
yeah, in the news there's a 96 years old who's still very active in politics. Anyway.
okay, so uh, I shall gently step away
Yeah, yeah.
from
I'm just mentioning. I'm not even
yeah,
mentioning the name, but my
yeah,
listeners would know. Yes.
yeah. So I think yes, the key leader, someone key characteristic, someone who knows himself or herself and also knows when to let go and what to let go of.
Yeah, that
Right.
is very, very profound. And I reflect upon that myself. So I am now sort of in the middle of my career. And sometimes I do reflect. So I had leadership positions in the past where I used to head marketing teams, growth teams in startups. And I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't have made that mistake. I shouldn't have been so harsh, or I shouldn't have called that person out publicly. So
Mm.
as I age or as I mature as a business leader, I was like, oh yeah, then now I'm more diplomatic. I shouldn't have done all these things. And it's like you said, self-awareness is very key. We cannot be everything everywhere all at once. Perhaps this is the name
Exactly.
of today's episode. So yeah, but like I sometimes reflect back on the young leader I was, and being a young leader that I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was more driven. I had a lot of energy, a lot of a lot of energy being young, and a lot of ambition in
Mm.
me.
Yes.
So and might have had a lot of collateral damage, and I've experienced this myself. I have been collateral damage much younger in my career. So, yeah, I think you know what I mean. So what is your advice to young leaders out there, right? So like just to give an example, when I was younger, I had a lot of ambition. So the ambition comes first, the goal, as I was very
Mm.
passionate and young. I'm not sure if you resonate with this,
Oh
but I
yeah,
was
yeah,
very
totally.
passionate and young, and I would be rude. I would be sometimes even throw people under the bus, as the word would say, as a young leader in the name of goals. But as I grow older, I'm like, now I see, oh my God, I shouldn't have done all those things when I was younger. But what is your advice to young leaders out there?
I think I resonate with what you said about how when we are younger, we are driven by ambition, and sometimes we feel like, oh, I have to do this in order to achieve this particular outcome at the expense of collateral damage. Um, I think recently someone asked me, right, as it was a question of reflection. It was the ending of a coaching conversation, and we were coming to a close. And somebody asked me, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself? And I thought about it for a while. I just said that whenever I'm in situations where I'm in doubt, it's better to err on the side of kindness. So when I'm not sure about something, it's to give people the benefit of doubt, think about how to be kind. And this was something that I learned from my martial arts teacher. The ironic thing is, because I'm quite slack at going for lessons, right? But the reason why I continue to go back as and when I can is my martial arts teachers have always told me that, when you learn about self-defense, when you learn about combat, the most important aspect of it is actually the development of one's character. And I think that is one advice I would tell young leaders, and that is, think about character, think about character development. Um, and when in doubt, give people the benefit of doubt, of course. Right? Because you see, I mean, if you look at the nature of the way things are playing out in the world of work right now, we have a lot of interconnected and interdependent systems, which means that the nature of work nowadays is also incredibly complex, right? And when things are complex, it also means that in many situations, there is no right or wrong answer. Okay, it really depends on uh, the context of what you're trying to achieve, right? So when there's really no right or wrong answer, then how do you bring the best out of everyone? It's very difficult to bring the best out of everyone when, like you say, right, we are very willing to take collateral damage. You know, we hurt people, we put them down. And when people feel under attack and they don't feel psychologically safe with this particular leader, is it then realistic to demand or expect their best? So I would say think about character development, think about the impact of one's leadership on the people in the team, and when in doubt, give people the benefit of doubt.
Yeah, I would say yes, you are right. And probably if I said that to my younger self, he would probably not take it into probably I would summarize it if I were to meet my younger self. I would say, um, in the long run, it's better to be kind in the long run because business will fail. You
Yeah,
will change
yeah,
jobs.
yeah,
You will
yeah.
change. You will change companies. The companies I used to work at don't exist anymore. So things will
Mm,
change. Businesses will fail. But if you're kind, 10 years later, they will at least be your friend. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly.
yes. So that is what I would say to my younger self. So great wisdom there. And I also saw on your post recently that you had reflections on your time flying. So if 18 years
Mm,
of flying and
mm,
you have a lot of course, lessons of leadership from the
mm,
cockpit. So
mm.
yeah, what can you take out of being a pilot to leadership?
Well, to be clear, I joined the airline in 2004, which was
Mm.
about 18 years ago, but my training took 2.5 years. So I've been flying for about 15 plus years, but not really 18 years.
Okay. My
Yeah.
father would say 30 cents change. No worries.
Okay.
My father is 70, so he's like 3 years is 30 cents to him.
I 30
Yeah.
cents. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but what I learned in flying is like you say, so the way flight training is structured is first you got to learn how to take care of yourself, which is why for any pilot, your first solo flight is so important, right? So that was one thing I learned. If you don't know how to take care of yourself, you got no business taking care of other people because you start with learning how to fly solo, you get your private pilot's license, and then you become a commercial pilot. Then you get a commercial pilot's license, right? So commercial pilot's license, you're licensed to carry passengers and goods. Then the responsibility changes, right? So first, you gotta learn how to take care of yourself. And after that, you learn how to take care of other people, right? And then when you enter something like the airline, then then it is as a leader, you are responsible for bringing the best out of different groups of people, right? So this is a great example of what I spoke earlier of interconnected and interdependent systems making work complex. So if you're talking about flying, we have things like we have the group team like the cabin crew that works very closely with us. And we also have the ground staff at the airport. We have the engineers. We have air traffic control. We have people back in base who are monitoring the flight. So it's how do we then uh, manage all these resources such that you arrive at an optimal decision? And the nature of complex work is also such that usually when you have some kind of problem or crisis, it's usually novel, which means that there is no set answer, there is no how to put it, uh, past year papers or something that you can easily refer to give you a solution. Usually it involves at some point asking various people in your team, hey, what's your input? what do you think, what are the pros and cons of this, and then ultimately coming up with a solution. So it's very different from what people think about, oh, I'm a pilot, I just sit there, I fly the plane, and that's it. But actually now a pilot requires things like the ability to adapt to situations, to make sense of all these different streams of information that's coming to you, and then to come up with a response that is suitable. So, and this is something that we are seeing in many other areas of work as well, right? The ability to make sense of things, to adapt to the situation, and then provide a meaningful response.
Thank you, Sau-Yong. So just to elaborate more on that, so what are the situations like you mentioned? There's the crew, there's perhaps the plane, and then there's weather. Are these some of the factors that you have to take into consideration?
Yes. And of course, things like, how much fuel should I carry on any given day? Because for, let's say, a flight from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, right? Even though it's a short flight, no two flights are the same. The weather from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur can change very quickly in the span of half an hour. The amount of traffic arriving into Sepang can also change depending on the time of the day. And all these are factors that we have to consider when we plan for the flight. And that's at the planning stage. And so you plan, but then when you actually execute, things will change very dynamically. And the thing about the plane is I can never park the plane in the sky, stop and think. The plane is constantly moving forward. And so you're also under that time pressure, right? So how do we then juggle all those things together? So I think first and foremost is, number one, it goes back to understanding oneself, right? Because everybody has different style of doing things. Everybody also has different blind spots. And when we are aware of those kind of things, then in preparation in our self-development journey, we will then know what we need to address. So even though pilots, we go through very stringent, very standardized training systems, which focus on competencies. How these competencies play out in real life will be very different because no two pilots, no two human beings are the same. So then it's understanding, okay, how do I myself, right? What is the best way that I will address this? So I think this is something that all leaders should think about, which is why outside of the airline, I'm also a strengths coach. And as a strengths coach, I help people discover, okay, what are your strengths? What are you good at? Because in so many cultures and so many societies, I won't even say whether it's a West or East thing. We try to look at what we are not good at, and we try to
I would
bring
say
it
it's a
up.
more of an East thing.
Yeah, if your BM is so good, you go for BM tuition, right? Yeah, if math is not good, you go for mathematics tuition, right? And all of this is, to pass exams. But in real life, when we're problem solving, it's kind of like, okay, what are the best ways that I tend to solve problems? Am I a technical person? Am I someone who's good at collaboration? Am I someone who is, more willing to try new things or take the tried and tested path? Okay. So really understanding oneself, at the heart of it all, extends to so many domains.
Yes, I love that. And that is part of self-awareness. So I also want to bring this to the podcast because I know that you've been on other podcasts. You can search for Sau-Yong on many other platforms and find him on YouTube and also on LinkedIn and also on many other podcast platforms. So you also mentioned something in called self-awareness is part of it, part of your T.H.R.I.V.E framework, which you co-founded. So very good examples that you gave just now. So like, can you tell us more on, how this framework would apply to, let's say, us as business leaders?
Oh, okay. So the framework was I co-discovered it with my co-founder, with Damien Wang. So Damien is also a commercial pilot like me. So we started from the premise of resilience is not just about perseverance and never give up, persistence. And while those things are true and they're from the mindset perspective, right? And attitudes, we wanted to see what other factors will allow a person to be more resilient in a more preemptive manner as opposed to when something happens, then what do we do? So we went into research on essential well-being pillars for the individual, and this was from one of Gallup's resources, the Gallup company. We started the book called Wellbeing 2.0. I think it was Jim Roth quoted by someone else. Apologies to the other person that I can't remember. Yeah, so we looked at it and then we saw that, there were these things like, okay, financial well-being is important, social well-being is important, community well-being is important, and even career well-being is important, which is why we came up with ultimately the T.H.R.I.V.E framework, and we use the hand as a model. So the hand, we're starting with the thumb. The thumb would be T. So T is thoughts, right? Mindset, beliefs, attitudes. Thoughts. H is your health, physical health. You cannot be resilient if you always have ill health or poor health. R is relationships, because without relationships, you cannot have love, kindness, friendship, generosity, compassion, those kind of things. I is income and investments, because like it or not, in the kind of societies that we live in, capitalism and stuff like that, money is a proxy for stability and security. While money does not guarantee happiness, a lack of money can lead to, will increase your odds of unhappiness. It's one thing. And the small finger, we call it V, vocation. We don't say career or work, we say vocation, because with vocation is the idea of purpose. And what we are seeing in the workplace, right, where many people are experiencing burnout, quiet quitting, is they lack purpose. They don't understand why they're doing. They see no meaning in what they do at work. And if you think about it, right, career well-being is very important, because for many working adults, it's what we do for most of our working hours. Not working hours, for most of our waking hours, right? And if we are doing things that we don't enjoy, that we don't find meaning in, that drain our spirit and enthusiasm, then of course it will affect our mental health and ultimately our physical health. So, and the last element of T.H.R.I.V.E, which we put on the palm, the E, stands for the enlightened self-awareness, because self-awareness, I'll use an example of someone who has a drinking problem, but he can't stop, like the alcoholic, right? He knows he has a drinking problem. It's causing him problems at work. It's causing him problems with his family, but he cannot stop. But he's aware. Enlightened self-awareness is somebody who knows what he or she needs to do to overcome particular problem they're experiencing. So this E will also bring together the elements of T.H.R.I.V.E, because number one, my hand is not the same as your hand. So what T.H.R.I.V.E looks like to you will look very different to me. It's one thing. And second thing, we use the hand because in order for us to thrive, our hands don't only serve ourselves, but our hands are also meant to lift other people up. If we want to thrive, we need to learn how to support other people. There is no such thing as an individual resilience. We are only as resilient as the community that we belong to. So that's the other message of T.H.R.I.V.E that we want to share. So in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, because that is very visual as well. And I would say every part is very important. Like I would say the one that people neglect the most are relationships. And you said, like say, you have to be part of a community. Because I follow football, soccer or football, right? A lot. And this is something people don't see behind the scenes. So a football player can be very good, can be physically very good, can play very well, paid very well, have everything going on. But what happens is why a football player fails at a football club. One of the biggest reasons, I'm not sure if you know this, is because of the wife. So sometimes they are paid very well. They move to a new country, like say join Manchester United. But the wife hates Manchester because it rains a lot. that player will fail in Manchester, being a best player in the world, can be best player in the world, but the wife is so important. So sometimes the agent will take care
Mm.
of the things of the wife's request. So that
Mm.
is so important. The wife will make the football player a very important part of football. So I understand when you said relationships. Yes, that is also important. All can have the best, can be paid the best, but relationships don't have, then it is also very critical as well.
I think what you highlight also raises an important point, right? It's like early in my flying career, I had a mentor so we were discussing, we're talking about how some pilots they choose to become expatriates, and then they'll move from country to country based on the contracts that they work on. And even back then, my mentor told me, before you make this decision, please discuss with your wife because she's the most important person in your life. I was like, oh, okay, that's a very good point he makes, because I think sometimes, like you say, right, in our ambition to play for the best club, earn the most money and all that. Sometimes we can all neglect the relationships that matter to us, or we forget that these relationships matter. And the other point about footballers not succeeding, I think it's not just the relationship with the spouse, but the ability to work with different teams, different members of their team, the ability to take feedback from their coach. So it also goes back to relationship, the professional relationship, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's I am just fun fact for the listeners. I am a big football fan. And when I was growing up, my dream was not to become a football player. My dream was to become a football manager. So I look for up. I'm not sure. Are you a football fan, Sau-Yong?
So not really, but I know a little bit of the some of the major clubs and what happens there.
Yeah. So I am a fan of the football managers. I actually idolize football managers rather than players. So I
Mm.
see a lot of bad leadership or good leadership, or even the same football manager at different organizations, different teams, how it explodes. Actually,
Mm.
football is like how it explodes a lot of times, or how it goes well, or so many different types of leadership styles. And I also watch documentaries. Like now they have documentaries of football dressing rooms. It's
Mm.
very boring to most people, but I love to watch. I said, oh, okay, this is how what they do inside there. So speaking about mentors, so like, you mentioned you have a
Mm.
mentor, and I know you are part of the Asian mentoring program.
Mm.
So how has a mentor helped you in your career?
I think the most basic, a mentor uh provides guidance, provides, how to put it, a preview of what lies ahead in somebody's career journey. So there'll be a little bit less, not to say that there entirely won't be, but there'll be less uncertainty, less insecurity on the part of the mentee. So I think my mentors have guided me in the sense that they were able to tell me, okay, this is what the career path generally looks like. These are the career options that are available. So it's up to me as to choose what I want to do. I think the other thing is also they also provide the benefit of their experience, which means that there are certain things about the job, about the organization that I would never have realized on my own. Like for instance, it's not only about what we do at the company, but how what we do at the company is also interacting with what the regulators require, and how do we then navigate the relationship with the regulators, for instance. So that's from the professional aspect. And I think also from the general life aspect, you know, it's like this the saying, they've eaten more salt than I've eaten rice. That's a very Chinese saying. So it's also giving life advice. I won't really say advice, but sharing wisdom on life in general. Even things like, when I talk about thrive, all the elements that matter, things like our mindsets, how we take care of our health, how we maintain the relationships in our lives. how we manage our finances, what kind of work is meaningful to you and things like that. All those kind of things I've been able to learn from my mentors. And I would say that would be like my advantage over many of my peers is that I have had a number of mentors from different sectors. So that has also helped boost my learning.
Yeah, thanks, Sau-Yong. So I know a lot of organizations have their mentorship programs,
Mm,
but how do you start it? Let's say it's not fixed by the organization. So normally an organization will pair you up with someone, but how do you start a mentor relationship? Because it's not really a paid relationship, man, right? So how do you
yeah.
start this mentor relationship?
I think the first thing is don't be shy. Don't be shy and don't be too cocky. So don't be shy in the sense that if you see someone that you feel might be a good mentor, just go up to them and talk and say, hey, um, would you be willing to mentor me? I mean, even recently, not that long ago, because as a captain, I became a captain in 2018. And if I'm going to fly until I'm the age of 65, for instance, it'd only good to have a mentor as a captain, which is why I approach a more senior captain who's also an instructor and just ask him, hey, can you be my mentor? So number one is don't be shy. Number two, don't get too cocky because when we are cocky, we can't listen. We're overconfident. We think we know more than we actually do, or we will miss out on the wisdom that other people are trying to share with us. So, and I think in any organization, there will always be people who are willing to give back, who are willing to share the benefit of their experiences. So it's just um, keeping a lookout, and going from there, just being willing to put yourself out there. Hello, sorry.
Oh, hey, okay. So we had a technical difficulty just now. So no worries.
It's
So
all
back to the how you look for a mentor who is a senior
okay.
captain.
Okay, so I just went up to him and asked. So I think that's the first part that I was saying, right? If you want to look for a mentor, the first thing is we cannot be shy. We must be willing to open our mouth and ask. But sometimes we we have all these insecurities holding us back, and it's a question of do we want to grow, or do we want to maintain this veneer of how to put it, of knowing of confidence? Because actually there's nothing wrong with approaching people and saying, hey, I wouldn't mind being mentored by you and learning from you. I think the other part about finding a mentor is also to not be so cocky. I think in my youth I was guilty of that. I was very cocky, very brash, thought I knew everything. And the downside of that is when I'm like that, then it's very difficult for me to learn from other people, right? I'm not so willing to listen, not so receptive to feedback. So I think that's the other part of looking for a mentor, and that is to stay humble. And humble is not the same as being subservient or being passive, but humble is just acknowledging the fact that there will always be someone who knows more than you do and someone that you can learn from. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is very interesting. And you said you have multiple mentors
Mm,
in different industries. So
mm.
I would say it is, do you know these mentors as friends beforehand? So or do you have long relationships with them, or is it you do approach them cold and say, hey, you would
Oh,
like to be my mentor?
wow, cool. Usually not cool.
Yeah, because I'm thinking from a
Mm,
younger leaders perspective, and they said,
mm.
let's say I looked up to that senior person in my organization, but I've not really talked to that person before,
Yes.
but and that person doesn't know I exist, you know.
Mm, mm.
So
Yeah,
how
yeah.
will you approach that situation?
Well, I think it's always it always starts with asking, right? I mean, if it's in professional capacity, then sometimes it's just going over to ask for advice. Just politely set it. Let's say someone fairly high up the food chain. You can set an appointment. Hey, I like to seek your advice on this. What do you think about this? And if the person says yes and is willing to share, then it's like, oh, thank you very much, I enjoyed it. Then that's keeping the door open, and then you find some ways to maintain the relationship. Could be simple as saying hi, greeting them, asking them how their day is, that kind of thing. But of course, we also have to acknowledge that not all attempts will be successful because it takes two hands to clap. And if that's the case, then it's also no hard feelings, right? Because it requires a match. And so don't be too disheartened if the initial attempts fail. The important thing is to try and not stop.
Awesome. And is it important to have a relationship beforehand, or it can be just ask anyway, even if they don't really know you?
I think it helps if some form of relationship has been established. Maybe not even you don't even need to call it a friendship, but it's just like there's this frequency of contact. This person knows who you are. You're comfortable speaking with each other. That definitely helps. Of course, you can also cold ask. Go online, see someone, and say, hey, uh, would you like to be my mentor? There's nothing stopping us from doing that. Sometimes it works, but usually I suppose the success rate won't be so high. I think it's if we, let's say on LinkedIn, we send a message, and we introduce ourselves, and then we say what we what we like about that person's content or that person's experience, and we like to have coffee and learn more, that kind of thing. I think that's an easy and soft approach. Yeah.
Yep. So good advice there. So I would say, not really having a friendship, but at least have some interaction. They need to know who you are, and maybe start
Yes.
off by asking some questions.
Yes.
Start off if they are, let's say, on LinkedIn. If they are on LinkedIn and creating content, not a lot of business leaders are, in my experience, but if they are
Yes.
creating content first, support their content and things like that, and maybe open many doors. Okay, so thank you for that. So that covers our part on mentorship and so many leadership lessons. So I have to ask you a personal question now. So we are almost an hour in. So I have a personal question. So not many people know this, but I do have a fear of flying. So
Okay.
I fly. I don't get me wrong. I fly. I recently, last month in February, I was in Singapore and I flew there. But I still have. When I was younger, I have fear of flying. So I try a lot of things to overcome my fear. For example, booking a seat more in front of the airplane, things like that. But I'm afraid of turbulence and many other things like that. And us living in Asia, you said that weather is not very, very kind to us. So what is your advice for those with fear of flying?
Well, this is a tip that I learned from my wife, who is a psychologist, because I also have another friend whose partner is extremely afraid of flying. And what you did is essentially what anyone would have done, right? They'll do a Google search. What do I do if I fear flying? Then you come across all these tips, how to mitigate the sensations and all that. But my wife was actually saying, just recognize that you will feel that feeling, and also have some, pay attention to how the feeling is rising in you. And also it'd be good to have some kind of like mind body awareness techniques, whether it's focusing on the breath, whether it's paying attention to something else or having some kind of mantra. But it's to not tell yourself that you shouldn't be afraid. Just recognizing that fear is what it is, right? And then also, like, when you have the exposure, the continued exposure over time, and everybody will take different time to get accustomed to it. When we are comfortable with that sensation, after a while, the intensity reduces. But of course, as a public service announcement, I have to say this, that whenever you're seated, please keep your seatbelt securely fastened. And also from the knowledge side is when it comes to turbulence, right? All modern commercial aircraft are built to withstand that kind of turbulence. That's one thing. And second thing, all pilots are trained to avoid the worst of the turbulence. Also, the nature of it is turbulence is also temporary. It's very rare that you get a flight that lasts from start to finish all the way you get turbulence. So it's also recognizing that these kind of phenomenon are temporary, that they are not permanent. So I think that will also help. I'm sure. Actually, I should say I'm not really sure whether that's helping, but that's what I can share with you.
Thank you, thank you. That really helps, and I try to do some of these things, and hopefully, I can. One of the things I do personally is I try to sit in front, so that
Mm,
I get a view of the flight attendants. So
mm,
I relationship. So I try to use them as the guide for my emotions, lah, sort of thing.
mm.
So that helps me personally, and sitting in front for me helps me as well. But I have this myth. I'm not sure if you can you agree to this. Is that I've read that flights in early in the morning have less
Mm.
turbulence. For example, 4-5 a.m.
Yeah, this is regional dependent. Uh, 4 5 a.m. If you don't have any thunderstorms, because sometimes there are certain thunderstorms. They are what we call intermonsoon thunderstorms, which tend to happen at pre-dawn hours. Now, those tend to cause turbulence. But if you have no such phenomenon, then it could be smoother because it is cooler, and because it's cooler, there is less updrafts. There are lesser updrafts, and you might experience less turbulence. But it's not a guarantee because we have to understand, where we live, Kuala Lumpur in Singapore is very near the equator. So the equator gets a lot of sun. And also we have a lot of how to put it, all these seasonal wind currents and all that, which lead to storms forming and also dissipating very quickly. I think in our part of the world, generally, when we see very very heavy thunderstorms, they last in the region of about 30 minutes. So that's also something to think about when we look at the nature of weather and turbulence in this part of the world.
Is it
I mean, if
storms
you look
that
at
is it storms that cause the turbulence? Is it, or it's been?
sometimes, so turbulence is something, it is movement of air. So turbulence could be due to storms. It could be due to changing temperature, changing ambient temperatures. It could be change in wind speed. So yes, generally it's associated with storms, but sometimes it could be clear turbulence as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sau-Yong. I heard it from the pilot's mouth himself. So now I can
Yeah.
clip this up, and every time I have to fly, I'll listen back to this. So I really enjoyed this conversation, Sau-Yong. So you're a very articulate person, and I like all your stories and examples, and all your answers are very well thought of. So I would like to maybe end with this question. So what so like for me, I always say when people ask me what is the book you recommend, and it's also
Mm,
a leader communication book that I recommend called The Nonviolent Communication by Michael Rosenberg.
mm.
I love that book.
Yes. And
So, but for you, what is the book that impacted you the most?
sure, the most
Yeah.
there's so many.
Yeah, I think you're the only guest that I think okay, maybe a few that I feel comfortable asking this question.
Sure. So there's one book title that I cannot say in full, and it's Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Beat.
Yes, okay.
It's a great book. Um, because it talks about it's actually a very authentic book about the journey of self-discovery. And he also delves into existential philosophies, which are good in understanding the nature of self. Even though he writes in very colorful language, I think that is a very important, those are very important learnings that we can gain from that particular book. So that's for Mark Manson. Then the other one was by the creator of Dilbert. What's his name again?
Yeah, I know who it is, but can't the name can't come to me as of now as well.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm just going to quickly Google. Right? You can edit this out. Scott Adams. Okay.
Okay.
And Scott Adams wrote a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. So this book is very good because it helps to reframe failure as just something we learn from. So there are two related sayings. Number one, from a good friend of mine in Scotland, he shared it with me, and that is you either win or you learn. And my mentor tells me there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So this book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, is also another book I highly recommend in learning how we can find our unique niche, the niche that we can succeed in, the niche that other people can't replicate. You know, how do you discover your talents and how do you make your talent work for you, right? And the another book that recently read is by James Clear. It's Atomic Habits. So Atomic Habits is very good in learning how to create a process so that we can live the kind of life we want to live. Because the general way of thinking is we focus on the outcome. We look at the outcome, but we forget the process. That's why people, when they make their New Year resolution to lose weight, by February they've given up. So Atomic Habits is a very good way of creating a process of tiny habits so that we can live the kind of life we want to live. And the fourth book I would recommend that I read recently is called Transitions. It's by William Bridges, and it talks about making sense of the changes that we go through in life. So, for instance, if I use myself as an example, it's from being a bachelor to getting married to having children, starting my own family, along with changes in my career, and then taking care of my aged parents, things like that. So that book is very good in the sense that many of us go through life, right, assuming that we will be able to figure things out as they come along. And then we see a lot of people who struggle, as first-time parents, or when they have a change in career, or when they get retrenched, or when they encounter something like a divorce. So, and I think one very important message in that book is how we don't live our lives separately in silos. Like, oh, this is my marriage, this is my work, these are my hobbies, these are my friends. No, it doesn't work that way. They're all interconnected. And sometimes when we try to compartmentalize things too much, it actually results in a lot of, um, shall I say, problems. Yeah.
Awesome.
So 4 books. Sorry, four
Yeah.
books.
Awesome. I think those are amazing books. So I would definitely check it out and read it also with the message that is coming out of the book. And yeah, those are also very popular books. So I think you can find in most stores or platforms. So like I would also ask, in this age, it's very hard to read a book personally. So are you an
Mm.
audiobook, hardcover, or Kindle person?
Whatever works.
Whatever works. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I like digital because digital allows me to write notes and bookmark and highlight across multiple devices. It also helps me extract key messages that particularly resonate with me into my own summaries. But I also like hard copy books because there is less distraction. And sometimes it's like I just want a digital detox for a while, 1 hour of reading, don't have my phone. But it really depends on how much did I like this book to the point where I actually buy a physical copy.
Yes,
So
as a
I still like
decoration as well. As a
yes.
Yeah. I would add that I would listen to audiobooks, but like for example, Atomic Habits, I wouldn't recommend as an audiobook because things that you need to get things out of it, you need to take notes and things like that, then don't get an audiobook. But I love listening to audiobooks where it's an autobiography, where it's
Mm,
narrated by the author. Then
yes.
I love an
Yes.
audiobook. Um,
Yes.
and that is the what instance I would go for an audiobook. But if things that I need to learn, get the diagrams or whatever from it, no audiobooks. I cannot imagine. So that is my
Yeah.
take. as
Yeah, I
well.
should totally check out audiobooks also for autobiographies. This is a great tip, man. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So we'll come to the end. So last question before we go. So I love to share more stories about Asian business leaders. So my last question to you is, who else would you recommend to be on this podcast?
Wow, it's a great question. Who else would I recommend
Yeah,
to
it
be
can be
on
in
this
your personal
podcast?
network, or it can be someone you know on LinkedIn.
I would say Sunil Mundra. Sunil Mundra is a good friend of mine. He's a consultant with the company ThoughtWorks.
All
So
right.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot about systems thinking, holistic thinking, from him. He's a great guy to talk to. And the other person that I would say is a great person to talk to about leadership as well is Kim Pong.
Mm,
He is the CEO of Strengths Asia, and he also has a mission to to bring Asian leadership to prominence.
thank you so much, Sau-Yong. So it was been a great chat.
Pleasure is mine, Rob.